Our next speaker is someone who's awesome, who's a friend of the foundation. It's Michael Kininmonth from Lenzing. Hi, Michael.
Afternoon, everybody. Hello.
Hello. So Michael's actually come to Ravensbourne a few times. He's been a guest judge, so he's heavily involved in your Denim project, students. So make sure you do a good project because he's going to be marking it. Michael, obviously we're going to play your video now. So if Joanne can play the video, and we'll come back with some questions. So see you very, very soon.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Kininmonth. I work for a company called Lenzing, and I'm going to talk to you about fibers, but particularly man-made cellulosic fibers. So considering we have a UK audience, I thought I'd start with something that is quite topical, and I'll leave you to ponder on what you think this slide means. And to give you a hint, I'm going to show you this image, which is from the 1970s. And I remember this. And although this is from the US, it was the same in Europe as well, because there was a shortage of oil, and there were lines of cars queuing up at petrol stations. And that's what we've lived through for the last 7 to 10 days here in the UK. What this is that you saw before, this is a graph of oil production and oil consumption in the history of mankind. And that's what it will look like. So for about 100 years, or 200 years either side of the year 2000, we have oil production. And then we use it all up. And the reason for showing you this is that in textile fibers today, we are dominated by fibers, and particularly polyester, that derive from oil. And when the oil runs out, what are we going to do about it? And so one of the things that you in your career might deal with and might consider is that we have to use alternative raw materials, and that those raw materials may well be based around cellulose. So cellulose is all the living stuff on Earth. It's in trees, bushes, grasses, algae, seaweed, etc. And we are going to have to use more and more of cellulose going forward for all kinds of things, not only textile fibers, for pharmaceuticals, for fuel, for many things. And one of the reasons is population. At the start of this millennium, in the year 2000, you had a world population of about 6 billion people. And by the middle of this century, and you will be alive then, we're probably going to be closer to 10 billion people. And many of those people are moving into middle classes, and they have more money to spend, and they're buying a lot of stuff. And that stuff, when it's manufactured, generates a lot of things and uses a lot of things like energy and water and resources and chemicals. And so there's going to be a depletion of finite resources. And that relates back to the reference from oil. So with cellulose, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it around. And so if you look at the stock worldwide in terms of tons, there's 1,500 billion tons. And around 60 billion tons of that regenerates every year. And about 1% of that is used by the pulping industry. And about 2% of that 1% goes into the fiber industry. And approximately 15% of that 2%, of that 1%, is actually used by Lenzing to make their fibers. So lots of cellulose to go for. If you look at a classification of fibers here, you can see there are the fibers that I'm going to be talking about today. So they are fibers that come from natural polymers, and what we do is transform or shape those natural polymers into a fiber. If you look around at where the cellulose is, cotton is nearly 98% cellulose. Wood is around 40 to 45% cellulose. And you can see the figures there for hemp and jute. And where do those fibers sit? Well, as you can see here from this graph, there's about 110 million tons of fiber produced every year. A lot of that are synthetic fibers. Synthetic means derived from oil. So the largest portion there, polyester. Cotton has been about the same proportion for decades now. And at the top, you see where the cellulose, man-made cellulosic fibers are, and they have now started to grow year on year. If you look back to the 20th century, the first half of the 20th century, the likes of man-made cellulosics grew significantly. But as polyester and nylon were invented and came into the market, the second half of the 20th century was totally dominated by synthetic fibers. But now we have reasons why synthetic fibers might reduce in volume because of the finite resources such as oil. So if you look at man-made cellulosic fibers, there are really 4 methods industrially that produce these fibers. So the viscose process, the lyocell process, cuprimonium, and acetate process. They're the ones that the company I work for are involved with. So viscose process makes viscose, and it also makes modal. And the lyocell process is the process which produces the fiber that we brand as TENCEL. There is an outline of viscose process versus lyocell process. So you can see the lyocell process is a much shorter, more elegant process. And lyocell process was really a complete redesign of the viscose process. Came into the market in the early 1990s and was really not designed to be a generic fiber of its own, but it had so many different properties that it became a generic fiber, although not planned. And that really is the value chain of man-made cellulosics. So the raw material for us is wood. So forest to wood, wood to pulp, pulp to fiber, and then it can go into various areas of textile, both apparel and technical and non-woven. The Lenzing fibers in the denim market are those fibers there. So TENCEL Lyocell is the main fiber that finds itself into denim. Refibra is really what I call TENCEL 2.0. It's a fiber based on both wood pulp and waste cotton pulp. So it's a fiber that has recycled content in. So this is the latest launch of TENCEL variant in the marketplace and is very much of its time with all the interest in recycling. And there are the brands that we use. Ecovero is the name of a responsible viscose that we make. VOCell is the name of fibers that go into non-wovens areas, and the fibers that go into industrial uses, we just use the Lenzing trademark. So why TENCEL Lyocell? Well, if you're going to be a fiber, you have to have certain properties, and if those properties and characteristics fit in with other fibers, that's where you're going to get success in the market. So aesthetics of TENCEL are things like comfort, breathability, soft touch and drape. TENCEL is stronger than cotton, both tensile and tear, wet and dry, good chemical resistance, and also its unique selling proposition is its environmental footprint. So really a strong portfolio there for TENCEL. And very practical things like the spinnability and blendability. So it can be blended with many other fibers, especially, for instance, with cotton. the similar staple lens, similar Desitex and fiber lens. You dye it with cellulosic dyes, so indigo, for instance, some reactives. And therefore, TENCEL is used a lot to enhance other blends with strength and comfort and environmental footprint. And there's really where the fibers have come historically. So viscose is really more than 100 years old, the viscose process. Modal came in the late 1950s, early 60s, and TENCEL was commercialized in 1992. And since those times, there's different variants come out. So, like I said before, Ecovera is the latest Lenzing viscose. Refibra is the latest Lenzing TENCEL Lyocell. And we now have something that is in filament form, which is called TENCEL Luxe. And today in the market, there's no getting away from, and it will probably dominate your careers in the industry. Everything is related back to sustainable processing, sustainable product, sustainable footprint. So this is an area that will dominate your careers, and the knowledge of it will just be there for you, like it's something like riding a bike, basically. But none of these terms I would have come across at your age in the industry. You know, you're already kind of savvy with sustainability speak in terms of, you know, climate change or global warming. But there are some of the terms today that are always bandied about. So net carbon zero, nature positive, circular economy, single-use plastics, minimizing food waste, clean growth, cradle to grave, cradle to cradle, natural capital, offsetting, setting science-based targets. So the fibers that we make are no difference. And what our company does is no different. We have to deal with all these sustainability issues today. And there are just a few of the challenges that we have to face as a fiber producer, and all the supply chain has to face, right down to the brands and retailers. And things are either related to the planet, or they might be related to ethical things and people. And they're all there for people to deal with at different levels, whatever is important to your business. So key challenges for Lenzing are things like wood and pulp sourcing, sustainable production technologies, circular economy, and transparency. People become quite emotional about the knowledge that we have to use trees for our production, and they are questioning why should we use trees. But the actual situation is that those trees are grown as a crop. They wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the pulping industry. And in fact, when you look at the derivation of the word sustainability, the earliest reference I could find was this German term there, which I won't try to pronounce, but it was coined back in the 1700s. And it was coined to describe how the forests in Europe were managed. And it translates as sustainable forestry, because the families who owned the forests at that time understood that they just couldn't remove all the trees from the forest. They could only remove a certain percentage, and the forests had to be managed. And there it was recognized that this way of treating the forests was sustainable from year to year and generation to generation. So the word sustainability originates from forestry. And in forestry, there are certifications, and the ones that you will probably know, or the one you probably know is FSC. There is another one called PEFC. And we as Lenzing do not source any wood that we know not to be certified. So no wood from ancient and endangered forests, no wood from high conservation areas. And most of all our wood now comes from, all this is audited by an NGO called Canopy. So there are the logos of the two major forest certification bodies that we use. And like I say, we do not knowingly use non-certified wood. And we basically are being policed by an NGO out of Canada called Canopy. And you can go on their website. They go under the name of Canopy Style. And they have ranked companies like Lenzing in how Lenzing operates. And they give out a scoring system. There are many brands now who have already signed up to these sourcing policies, and brands will commit, for instance, to only sourcing fiber from companies who have a certain ranking in the Canopy Style performance matrix. And there's an example, and you can go online. Deforestation really is not related to PEFC or FSC. They are companies who certify and manage the forests. And although trees are cut down, new trees are planted. And in fact, year on year, European forests are growing rather than diminishing. PEFC, FSC were never set up to counter deforestation. And the reality is that a lot of the deforestation come from agricultural commodities. Cattle, palm oil, soya, cocoa, rubber, coffee are the biggest culprits of this. So you can see their deforestation between 2001 and 2015. That is all driven by these commodities. So this is really the area that is the area of deforestation that's completely outside the control of the industry that we work in, and is more related to the food industry. So when you're thinking about deforestation, have a look. There's plenty of stuff online and you can research that, but I have to stress it's nothing to do with the industry that we work in. Just in general, on other issues to do with environmental issues, if you look at Lenzing value chain there, so we go from wood sourcing to biorefinery and pulp, we go to fiber production goes into textiles, it's made into garments sold by brands and retailers, consumer use, end of life might be compostability, and that's putting goodness back into the soil, which the trees grow from. So you almost got a circle of cellulose there. That is the reality of what we have to deal with at all those points on that circle. Those are the initiatives, those are the certifications along the value chain that we are today dealing with in terms of certification or complying with NGOs or complying with standards. And so today, our sustainability team has grown from about 1 member. Now we have over 12 members of just a sustainability team within Lenzing, because there's all those things that we have to engage with. And from day to day, those engagements might be those things you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. So there's water, there's CO2 emissions, sustainable materials, chemicals, toxicity, circular economy, employee community. And you can just see some things there from some of the brands who are specifying what they are doing and what they expect from their suppliers in terms of all those things. So it's quite a minefield. So, like I say, this is what you will have to deal with in the future within your textile career. And I would say, instead of being somebody on the sideline who is taking a selfie of themselves and recording, a forest fire going on, I would say that you can be an activist in the way that you work in your career. You can be somebody who makes the right choices on sustainability, and particularly on textile fibers that have a big environmental footprint. You will have choices which you can choose in your work. So thank you for your attention. And any questions?
Superb, Michael, and it's great that we pre-recorded it because we've got some questions now. First question, straight out the bat, is the raw material grown especially for lensing, or is it a waste product? I think you answered this, but how would you answer that question?
No, it isn't especially for lensing. I think, you know, forest owners, large or small, their product will go into different industries. We are involved in a project in Brazil where we will have a new pulping plant, and those forests will be owned by ourselves.
Okay, there you go. That's answered it. Could TENCEL eventually like replace all unsustainable fibers used in the industry right now? Very fun question.
Well, I looked at some figures a few years ago. I looked at the subsidies that were given to cotton in the US over about a 15-year period, and it added up to about $30 billion. And so I worked out how many lyocell plants we could build with that. And so instead of man-made cellulose, it's been 6 million tons a year. It will be more than 60 million tons a year. So we haven't really been we haven't been competing on a level playing field. Can it replace everything? Well, probably not. There's a position for every fiber, and the reason why polyester and cotton are so widely used is that because they're great fibers with great properties, but there are issues for both their fibers, and there's going to have to be room for more fibers in the future.
Yeah, absolutely right. Just a comment. Okay, the world isn't running out of oil. It's you know, gold, coal, and gas. We just decided to stop using it because of global warming. The world didn't leave stone. It's just a comment. It's some rant, which is quite funny. Thanks, Terry. Emma, what is specifically lyocell chemistry resistant to? I don't know if it's resistant to, but I can answer that.
Well, if you're a textile fiber and you go into fabrics, you have to be resistant to certain things, like chemicals, for instance. So you know, you're exposed in dyeing and finishing. You're exposed to things with high alkalinity, high acidity, and not every fiber can resist those. So you know, the denim industry, for instance, you know, at least 50% of a denim garment, 50% of the denim industry is the laundry.
Yes.
And in that laundry, you can have some really robust wet processing, and you need fibers that can withstand that. And so, yeah, so TENCEL is good at being resistant to those sort of chemicals.
Especially PP as well as laser, it's proven its worth that over the last.
Yeah, I mean, it can weaken chemicals significantly. It can weaken fibers and fabrics significantly. So you need things that will withstand that.
Okay, good question, Emma. Question here: How do you promote cradle to cradle management at Lenzing? Do you consider PLC of the fiber to final garment? Thank you.
Well, recycling. There's tons of things being written about recycling, but it's complicated. And we are involved with what's called chemical recycling. So we are taking waste cellulose in the form of cotton, and instead of using only wood pulp, we'll use cellulose in the form of cotton to make into a pulp. And then we spin a fiber from that. There you have a virgin fiber. The alternative to that is mechanical recycling, which means you're just tearing up old cotton garments, and by doing that, you end up with very short fibers that spin into low quality yarns that make your low quality textiles. So that route has not found a place in the industry widely. The chemical route is making virgin fibers which are high quality, and so effectively you have a cradle to cradle situation. You can make new fibers into garments, end of life, you can turn them back into virgin fibers again. So that is a cradle to cradle model. It's not well developed. It's more expensive, but we're getting there. So Refibra is an example of that.
And your like Refiba fabric that you did with Candiani, it won the ITMA Design Award. So, you know, there are some amazing things that you guys are
Yeah, so Candiani, well-known Italian denim mill, they made a product which was a blend of mechanically recycled cotton and Refibra, and it won an award at the 2000 and I can't remember now.
It's
2017 ITMA exhibition. So yeah, so it's of its time, but it's not easy.
Okay, a couple more questions before we end. Do you know the average how long it takes for a tree to reach full maturity? I guess that's a question regarding the sustainable trees.
Well, all trees are different. I saw a program many years ago on the BBC, and it was about building houses from wood, and they were building them from oak, and their model was that the oak is left for 300 years and they chop it down and everybody's horrified by it. Whereas in TENCEL's time, we've used eucalyptus, probably one of the fastest growing trees there is, and that is taken at 7 years.
Right.
But every species is different. So in our case, it's very quick.
But you can get different types of, because you blend your fiber, don't you? So what I mean is, like, if you bought some trees from a different stock, or they were oak, for instance, which I'm sure you probably don't use, but would it be a different type of TENCEL Lyocell, or fundamentally it will all be the same?
The pulp does have a small influence on it, but we use a blend of different fibers. Modal is mainly beechwood, viscose is like fir and things like that. I mean, the thing about forests is that they are grown on what's called marginal land, so it's not land where arable crops can grow. It leaves very low amount of irrigation, no pesticides or herbicides.
It's all like rain-fed, right? It's all rain.
So it's rain-fed, and so the story behind trees, if you really research it, is a positive one.
Okay, I think we might have to leave it here, Michael. You've been amazing. Thank you for pre-recording it, and thank you for answering nearly all the questions. I think there might be one or two more, so maybe if you can kindly go on the Q&A.
Okay, will do.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael, and see you again, sort of next time. Amazing.